They've been through hell. So many innocent people have been killed. So many communities have been destroyed. The Palestinian people deserve peace and the right to determine their own futures. And so we're working urgently to close this deal.
Okay, so we're going to leave President Biden, I should say, speaking in Washington there. And he just touched right at the end of that speech as we're leaving them on the Middle East and on this ceasefire, this proposed ceasefire deal in Gaza. He said that it was on the brink of coming to fruition. He said they're pressing hard to close the deal and that the Palestinian people deserve peace and the right to determine their own future, and they're working hard to secure a deal. Let's bring in Khaled Elgindy now, who's a senior fellow and director of the Programme on Palestine and Palestinian Israeli Affairs at the Middle East Institute at Georgetown University. Khaled, good to see you. First of all, what did you make of what President Biden had to say?
Yeah, I think it was a typical sort of valedictory speech. He was trying to cast his own narrative for how his particularly performance on foreign policy will be remembered. That America is stronger and its alliances are stronger and that America is in a better position than it was 4 years ago. Whether that narrative actually holds, I think, remains to be seen. I think there's quite a lot of wishful thinking involved there. And it was interesting that there was no major announcement of a breakthrough on Gaza ceasefire. I think many people were expecting that. Instead, we heard basically the same message we've heard since May, and that is we are very close to an agreement, a ceasefire deal that would end this war, but we're not quite there yet. I think people are hopeful, but it's clear that a deal hasn't been clinched as of this moment.
He took a long time to get to the Middle East. He kind of touched a little bit on Syria, but he didn't talk about Gaza or Hamas or Israel, the ceasefire deal, for, a good 20, 30 minutes. Does that tell you something about his priorities, or are we reading too much into it?
Well, I think he wants to accentuate the positive, and there's not a lot of positive to talk about when we look at the situation in Gaza. So, it's not surprising that he waited till the end, but also that he said very little because apparently the deal hasn't, we don't have a breakthrough. So that part of it is not that surprising. It is, I think if you look at his overall legacy, I think it will be, I think it will be colored to a very great extent by the events in Gaza and the fact that this is the most deadly, most destructive war in the 100-year history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And that his administration contributed to that significantly, to the massive scale of death and destruction in Gaza. And I think for many people in the region in particular, that's how they will remember Joe Biden.
And what's your take on the status of these ceasefire deal talks at the moment? We're hearing that potentially there could be an announcement within hours or days, possibly even this week. Are you feeling more optimistic than on the previous occasions where we've heard there's a deal close and then nothing happens?
Yeah, I think optimism is probably not a word that many of us in the Middle East analyst community would use. I think if it does appear that the parties are closer than they had been at any previous point, but that's also been true in the past. We've been told many times that a deal was just on the brink and that it was only a matter of time. And so one of these times they're going to be right. It may be, this may be the moment. It does appear to be different, but the real question is what is in the agreement. It's clear that the agreement will not include a commitment by Israel to end the war permanently. And that is something that Hamas has been holding out for and reluctant to sign on to anything that doesn't end the war. Hamas may be conceding on that point and instead count on some kind of assurance from the United States that it will pressure Israel to end the war. But I think that's the key point that it hinges on. So it could happen, but it's not clear what it means if it does happen, if it doesn't actually lead to an end to the death and destruction in Gaza.
Indeed. Khaled, really good to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us and for waiting so patiently while Joe Biden was speaking. Khaled Elgindy there from the Middle East Institute at Georgetown University.